Hey, this is John Lee Dumas of the award-winning podcast Entrepreneurs on Fire, and you're listening to the Excelsior Journeys with George Sirois, presented by the Right Pack Radio Podcasting Network. Prepare to ignite.
Is there a burning desire within to share your creativity with the rest of the world? Do you insist on pursuing your passion by any means necessary? Then you are on an Excelsior journey, and you are not alone. Welcome to Excelsior Journeys. I'm George Sirois, and I'm so happy that you took the time to join me here for episode 1 of this podcast that has been months in the making. As the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu said, the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. What you're hearing right now is the first step for me. As I stated in my episode 0 post, which went live last week, I've been plotting the show out ever since I took a long look at the friends that I have on Facebook. People I've known throughout my life in person or only online, creative people who are following their passions and persistently staying on the road to success. I looked at all of them and thought to myself, these people need to be on a podcast. They need to share their stories with the rest of the world. Turns out they would be on a podcast. Just so happens it would be mine. I hope all of the discussions you'll hear on this show will inspire and motivate you to set out on your own creative journey. And since every journey needs a map, I have a little something special for you. On my website, www.he'sgotit.com, as in by George He's Got It, you'll see a button on the top that says Excelsior Journeys. Click on that and you'll be taken to the show's homepage where you can download your very own Excelsior Journeys to-be list. Henry David Thoreau said, "All want not something to do, but someone to be." And that's how I've carried myself ever since I decided I wasn't going to write. I am a writer. I will not narrate audiobooks. I am an audiobook narrator. It's that little tweak that I found very empowering, and I hope you'll feel the same way. So on this sheet, after you print it out, you'll write your name on the top line, and then on the bottom line, you'll write what you are. Are you a fellow author? Are you an actor? Are you a dancer? Are you a choreographer? Are you an artist? Are you a pastor? What path do you want to take in your life? Once you answer that, you'll use the 10 lines underneath to map out for yourself how you intend to make your dreams into reality. And make sure you share it with me. At the bottom of the page is my email address, and I would love to hear from you. So again, go to www.he'sgotit.com/Excelsior Journeys and download your to-be list. Now, we're starting off Excelsior Journeys by sitting down with multi-award-winning West Coast Swing dancer, instructor, event director, and producer of the Global Online Open, Doug Rousar. Doug was the first out-of-town instructor to lead a Saturday workshop during my first year as a member of the St. Louis Rebels, and his lessons and demeanor play a huge part in why I enjoy West Coast Swing so much, and why so many others do as well. And by the way, if you're living in the St. Louis area and want to give West Coast Swing a try for yourself, I have some recommendations for you. Look up the St. Louis Rebels, their sister club, Destination Swing, and finally, Solingo's Saturday Night Dance, Body Talk. All 3 groups guarantee a great time will be had, and all 3 have beginner classes before every social dance, so you have no excuse. Go check them out. And if you're not in the St. Louis area, look up West Coast Swing on the web. You'll be surprised by what you find. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, Doug Rousar will be here sharing his journey with us. So don't go anywhere. Today's show is brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. If you've never been an Audible customer and want to see what they offer, just go to www.audibletrial.com/Excelsior Journeys and browse the unmatched selection of audio programs. Download a title for free and start listening. It's that easy. Why Audible? Audible content includes an unmatched selection of audiobooks, original audio shows, news, comedy, and more from the leading audiobook publishers, broadcasters, and entertainers. And with this free 30-day trial, you'll have your pick of it all. You can hear books of all genres narrated by Jim Dale, Stephen Fry, Will Patton, Alex Hyde White, Jeff Brick, Neil Shaw, William Demerit, and even a few by me. George Sirois. So go to www.audibletrial.com/ExcelsiorJourneys and start your own 30-day journey with Audible today. Welcome back to Excelsior Journeys. My name is George Sirois. I'm so glad that you guys are with us. When Cheryl was with me when we were living together in Queens, New York, she had tried many, many times to get me into West Coast swing. We had tried to go to a couple of different clubs over in the city. We had tried different bars for West Coast swing night. The only problem was when we went there, the West Coast swing dancing wouldn't really start until about 9, sometimes even 10 o'clock. And it was a weeknight, and it was at least $10 for each of us to get in. So it was very kind of off-putting for me. And also, considering the fact that every time she tried to teach me, it wouldn't click for me. Now, fast forward to November of 2011, and we had made the move from New York to St. Louis. We're living at her mother's house. The only people that I know are her friends. There was nothing there really for me. And I still remember this particular early November day as clearly as yesterday. But I was so depressed that I felt like I'd hit rock bottom. I just felt like there was nothing here for me. I was homesick for one thing, and I was also just very much like out of sorts. I didn't like where I was in my head. And that night, I'm so thankful now that I told Cheryl about this, because she looked up some stuff online, and turns out that there was a West Coast swing night with the local West Coast swing dance club called the St. Louis Rebels. And so we went there. Now, normally for any sort of Rebels event, there are lessons, and then they go into social dancing. In this case, there was a club meeting that was happening, and then it went into social dancing right then and there. So there were no lessons for anyone who was brand new coming into this. And at this point, there really wasn't any need for any new people to come in, because it was a club meeting, and then with a social dancing afterwards. So we were open to be there for the social dancing. And during the time that I was there, I was able to get the rhythm, but I didn't know any of the moves. And so I want to throw a special shout out to a few people that really made sure that I got out on the dance floor. And that's Dawn DeGrouchet, Mike Bickline, and Heather Douglas. Because what they did was they got me out on the dance floor, and they did not want me to do any moves. They just wanted me to feel the rhythm with the song. So I learned the basic cadence, which was walk, walk, triple step, triple step. And I kept doing that just over and over again while I was on the dance floor. And I found myself having fun. Who knew? And so jump ahead to the next Friday. I came in, and I had my first lesson with Rick Gendron. And from my first lesson, all of a sudden I was hooked. It felt like everything had kind of clicked into place, and I suddenly knew what I was doing. I was having fun, and I was getting it right. And that sort of momentum really built and built and built. And so we're going to push forward 5, maybe 6 months or so at the most. There was a Saturday workshop, and a gentleman named Doug Rousar and his wife at the time, Lori Rousar, they were coming into town, and they were going to basically give us a workshop from Saturday afternoon to Saturday evening, and then social dancing afterwards. And it was so much fun. And I believe that Doug only knows now just how much of a role that he played in the enjoyment for West Coast swing to really, really escalate it for me. So when I decided that I was going to make this podcast, Excelsior Journeys, I knew that I needed to have someone who represented West Coast swing to come out here. And considering everything that he has done, Doug is a multi-award-winning dancer, instructor, and is now the producer of a very big, groundbreaking type of event called the Global Online Open. We're definitely going to be talking about that. It only felt natural that I have him on here. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Doug Rousar. Doug, how are you, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm super excited to be a part of this, and that's a pretty darn cool story right there. Glad to hear that West Coast Swing was able to kind of bring you out of your rut and you found some enjoyment in it. So that's pretty awesome.
I owe so much to West Coast Swing. I'm really, really appreciative of it. Basically just helping me kind of break out of my shell. Like I really felt like I had nothing here to do until we started going to the Rebels regularly. And all of a sudden, I had something to look forward to every Friday. And it became this really great social atmosphere. I made so many friends that I still have today. And so that's a huge part of my life. And it was not long after your workshop that I started even considering the possibility of competing.
Cool.
And so it was because of that led to me becoming a competitor for the newcomer level at the Jack and Jill at the Rebels annual competition called Meet Me in St. Louis.
Yeah.
And wound up taking third place, my first time competing. So, I consider myself, even though like I'm not as fluent as you, as many other people that I've known throughout the years, but I still consider myself somewhat of a success story with West Coast Swing. So before we go a little bit further, I know that you can do a much better job of explaining it than I can. Tell our listeners just what is West Coast Swing? What is it that makes it what it is?
Yeah, it's always a difficult definition because basically what we deal with on a daily is that folks have this preconceived notion or understanding or just exposure to a certain type of swing dancing, and we can attribute a lot of that to the Gap commercials.
I was about to say that, the Gap commercials.
Right.
Gap commercials, you got Swingers from 97,
Right.
you got Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, and the rise of that culture and everything coming up the way it did.
Right. And then our current trends, you've got shows like So You Think You Can Dance and Dancing with the Stars that highlight the more rhythmic style of swing, like jive, East Coast swing. And I think they even tried to do Lindy Hop at one point in time, but that still kind of feeds into what most people know of as swing. They picture big band, they picture military outfits. They just have this Hollywood generalization of the dance. What's cool about West Coast swing is that it's rooted from those dances. So there is a history in our dance style that really comes from those genres and those iterations. But the reason why it's evolved to something so unique and special is that it's always been influenced by the music. So what you find with this style of swing is it's got a structure. I think there's some debate there as well as to like defining like a syllabus per se, but it's got a structure, but based around that structure is everyone's individual character, their style, what they bring to the table. So our style of swing, you'll see a lot of people come over from other genres and bring those influences into their dance, that uniqueness into their dance. So not a cut on ballroom by any way, shape, or form, because I completely appreciate ballroom style of dance. But typically in ballroom, a waltz always looks like a waltz, always looks like a waltz from couple to couple. It typically looks very similar, if not the same. But with West Coast swing, you recognize elements of the dance, but it's always got the flavor or characteristic of the person executing those moves. Well, so if they've got a more comfortable hip hop movement or hip hop background, they bring those elements into the dance. If they have a zouk influence or a shag influence, they bring those elements of dance, and it's constantly adding flavor and makes our dance grow. So it's constantly evolving, constantly changing. But the really cool thing about it, and where most people can connect or relate to it, is we dance to all varieties of music. So R&B, hip hop, jazz, country. So our community is very diverse, I guess is a really good way to say that.
I've even told a lot of different friends that a great way to kind of identify what kind of music you hear for West Coast swing is basically just turn on top 40. You turn on Y98 over here in St. Louis, you'll get this really great variety. And as long as you get that, as long as it goes into that beat, which so many songs do these days, it's amazing just how universal this dance can be. And yet there's so many people that don't know about it. It's almost like it's really kind of like a best kept secret.
Yeah, we have a couple of challenges in that. So like even myself, I can distinctly recall seeing a number of ads about this West Coast swing, and immediately my mind always went to, well, it must be country western dancing. So I would just never even think to explore or investigate what this West Coast swing was, because I just didn't have any interest in country music at the time. I actually really appreciate it and like it now, just because of the exposure I've had through this dance to other genres and other music. But at the time, so our general public, it's really, you put an ad out there saying, hey, West Coast swing lessons. And the general public probably thinks it's a country western type of dance, or they see the word swing and they picture aerials and acrobatics and jumping around. So yeah, it's difficult to create that public knowledge. And then we even struggle with the really glorified forums like the dance contests on TV today, because they try to implement West Coast swing, because we're fortunate that we have people like Jordan and Tot and Benji and Kyle and Sarah, those folks that are out there and getting into those platforms. But they always have to take it to the really overly tricky, heightened performance side of things, because it has to be entertainment. At the end of the day, producers are going to want something that's exciting. And sometimes that exposes a dance to almost be non-attainable.
It's kind of weird how these producers really need to do is show up at one of these West Coast swing competitions, show up at like a US Open or Mimi in St. Louis or Midwest Westie Fest or Swing Diego, like so many different places. And they'll see like a really great, exciting routine.
Right. But the problem, I was having this conversation this weekend, oddly enough, just kind of not in any way, shape, or form related to this conversation, because I didn't know what directions we would be going. But it came out this weekend that talking with another pro, one that I admire and respect a great deal, who's had some exposure to the entertainment industry, agrees and has a very valid point that our dance is just difficult to film.
That's a really good point.
Yeah, it's just difficult to film, and the slot-based mechanism, the way it does present, it doesn't have that same dynamic and characteristic, which makes things interesting in terms of the Global Online Open, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit later. But that's kind of introduced some new realms and kind of taken the artistic level and opportunities and made us kind of second guess. I would say more just appreciate and understand where we could go with this dance to expose it in a very artistic way.
So let's go and take a little trip to the beginning. Because I would love to hear, what was that lightning moment? What was it that made this dance strike for you in a way that it was just like, I definitely want to learn that? When you started out, were you a dancer growing up?
Yeah, so this could be a pretty dangerous rabbit hole, so I'm not quite sure. I'll do the best I can, and feel free to edit as you
absolutely.
wish.
Hey, the beauty about this is that this is what it's made for. Just go on and tell your story. Sure. We all want to hear it.
So I was not a trained dancer in any way, shape, or form prior to my life in West Coast swing, but I was exposed to dance in many different ways. So I grew up in Milwaukee, and it's probably an over-exaggeration, but my memory is of such that we moved a lot when I was a kid in Milwaukee. I probably lived in every suburb. Again, probably a dramatization of the actual facts, but as a kid, that's certainly what it felt like. And I was in a lot of schools where I was a minority, and I can recall some really, really bad instances and situations at those schools. But the one really positive that came out of it is, and this is no lie, we used to go out at recess and we would do the cardboard box in the playground, and we would attempt to break dance. And that was just a thing that we did regularly. And I can remember just having this desire to perform, as bad as it was. Like, we would go to our campgrounds, and my folks would have their friends over from the neighboring campsites, and next thing you know, I'm in front of the fire and they're playing music and I'm breakdancing, and it is bad, like just bad. But that was an exposure where I kind of felt like, okay, there's something inside of me that enjoys this. I don't know what it is, but I didn't have the childhood where extracurriculars were abundant. I didn't have exposure to dance classes and sports and all that stuff early on in life. So it kind of, I guess in a way, got shelved for a while. And then a lot of my passion was around aviation. So
really?
Yeah, oddly enough. So the big trips or the big vacations for me as a young child was going up to traveling about an hour and a half north to where my grandparents lived in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, which hosts one of the largest, if not the largest, aviation convention in the world. And my grandfather was the chairman of Warbird Grounds. So
Wow.
yeah, so I mean, my whole childhood, I'm all around pilots and World War II aircraft. And the only reason why I really bring that part up, because it seems kind of so irrelevant to the grand scheme of what our topic is really around my dance career, is that it did expose me to big band music, swing music, hardcore polka music, because they would have these parties in the hangars, and they'd have these live bands. And I can remember very distinctly doing like Flying Dutchman style polka around the dance floor with my grandma. So that was kind of like my first exposure really to that type of music and swing. So being around that environment was really influential to me, and it kind of led me down a path of having interest in those types of musicals. So my grandfather, well, my grandfather used to play like the Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, like all those genre of musicals. So we're talking like Guys and Dolls and
Singing in the Rain.
Singing in the Rain. Yeah. So I grew up around that, and again, I don't know if it really connected with me in the way that I enjoyed it and I appreciated it, but I didn't have that desire at the moment to say I have to be a dancer, simply because I just didn't have that exposure to like, this is an opportunity for me. I never really saw it as an opportunity for me to do it, because I just didn't have that extracurricular exposure to my life. So fast forward, I get into middle school, high school, and my passion becomes music. So I was in choir, your basic general choir for 5th grade, 6th grade, and then in 7th grade, I started playing the trumpet. And immediately gravitated to the trumpet, became first chair, which everybody in the trumpet section hated me because for some reason I had a natural ability for music. I could read music extremely well, very rhythmic, and just worked my butt off to be the best trumpet player I could be. And right away out of the gates, I'm first chair. Concert band, so I'm in with a bunch of seniors and I'm playing in a jazz band. I nail the first chair because I'm really good at improvisation. So for a long time, trumpet and band and jazz was a major part of my life, and I enjoyed the choral side of things.
Wow.
Yeah, so told you, big rabbit hole. So now,
no, keep going. This is great stuff. Yeah.
So band, and being as good as I was on the trumpet, got me into a couple pit orchestras for musicals.
Really? Do you remember which ones?
The first one would have been freshman year, Guys and Dolls.
Nice.
Playing for that, and I saw that, and then I was like, I was in choir. I didn't really audition. I really didn't take it all that seriously, so I ended up with like choir member 45. Where you're in the back row, you're kind of doing the step touch, and
one step away from playing a tree or so.
Yeah, exactly that. But now I'm starting to really, really like enjoy performing. Like here's an outlet for me. Like I'm feeling like I'm pretty good at it. So I started shifting focus a bit from band and trumpet to drama and music. Had a knack for it and really comfortable, really loving it. I think it really I was really close with my grandfather, and so I think it even like made me feel closer, because right out of the gate, like I said, the first show I was in was Guys and Dolls, and then next thing you know, we're in Anything Goes.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so it's like that genre, right? So it's like it feels good to me. I felt comfortable. I really liked the music. I really liked the elements. And I started paying attention to back of the house, the soundboards, the lighting, the staging. I was just really into the whole process. And then the big year, the life-changing year, was my junior year, because the director decided to do Singing in the Rain.
Nice. Very nice.
I hardcore wanted the lead, just because it's the lead. I wanted the lead role. But my favorite performer is Donald O'Connor. Like to this day, I still have this major admiration for Donald O'Connor, just because of how his charisma, his character. He was always a character role that was like larger than life.
And he could steal scenes, and then at the same time know when to just take a step over, not even to the back, but just to the side, and and let Gene go. But then
Absolutely.
also just like keep up with him and everything, almost like pushing Gene to.
And he could be so
get up to his
effective
level.
just standing there, like
Yeah.
just being present in the scene. So I had this huge admiration for him. So funny enough, I wasn't going for the Donald O'Connor role. I was going for the lead because I just had in my head I really wanted the lead. I wanted to do the title song. I wanted to do all that. Well, I didn't get it. I got the Donald O'Connor role.
But that means you got Make 'em Laugh, though.
Exactly. And there's my life-changing moment. So I'm like, okay, if I'm going to do this role, I'm going to do it big. And high schools still do it to this day, but it's very, very common when I was in school that they would double cast a show. So they would have like the Friday, Sunday cast, and then they would have this Saturday evening cast. So I was double cast in the role. And
so you got them both?
No, so meaning I had another person playing the exact same role as me.
Oh, I see.
On the opposite nights, right?
Yeah.
So, so this is where it gets interesting, because I loved Donald Connor so much, and I loved the Make 'em Laugh scene so much in the movie. I really wanted to up the ante. So this is the first time I ever went after learning how to dance, and I told myself I'm going to learn how to tap dance.
Nice.
I'm gonna put the time in. And I didn't at first, I didn't run it through the choreographers, I didn't run it through the directors. I just took my number and sought out help, learned basics, started to choreograph, got help choreographing, loved that process, and then really loved the challenge of trying to build my own choreography around the constraints of the musical staging that was already in play, because I couldn't change those things because I was cast with someone else who was learning the choreography from the choreographers. And they were great. They did exactly what they needed to do for those shows, but they were the step together, step touch, grapevine here, jazz hands type of choreo. And I'm like, I really want to up the ante.
So it's basically like you're kind of left to you're restricted to the ability of the other guy who's cast with you.
Yeah, and it wasn't necessarily his ability. It was just more so like, typical fashion. You're told this is your choreography and you do it. He's super talented dude. I wouldn't say probably, he had a way better voice than I did for the role. But I had that desire to really want to try and emulate and do that role justice. So I learned it and I worked my butt off, and I still remember the steps to this day. That's how ingrained it was. I probably can do half of the routine. But about 2 weeks before the show, I finally went to the choreographers and said, hey, this is what I've been doing. Can I show you? Are you cool with me doing this? And they were pleased. They said, work a little bit harder. And then tech week, I did it again. And they said, all right, go for it. And opening night, we got to Make 'em Laugh. And I busted out the big solo tap number. And the first time at that school, and probably the only time I can remember, standing ovation in the middle of the performance. Like I hadn't even finished yet, and they were on their feet.
That is fantastic.
And that was
you
the
never
moment.
Forget those kinds of moments. Like,
yeah, that was the moment when I truly fell in love with music theater, truly fell in love with dance, and I made that decision to right then and there that I was going to go to school for music. I was going to be a music teacher, and I was going to pursue performance.
Fantastic.
And I did for a while. So I went to a private music school in Chicago and studied for 2.5 years, did really, really well, really, really loved it. And while I was doing that, I was doing choreography for local choirs, for show choirs. I was doing musical staging for shows. I was producing shows. I was directing shows. So I was really in the theater life. And so that's kind of what led me to West Coast Swing. So I got to the last year and a half, let's just say 2 years of my school to be a music teacher. All the classes were symphonics and orchestrations, and they're all really band focused. And I had a really hard time because it was so expensive. It was so expensive to go to this school. Yeah. And I really felt like I was not getting the education that I passionately wanted. Like I I wanted things around choral and musical staging and just all the types of things that would embody being a choir teacher, and the school wasn't providing it for me. So I decided it was time to go back home. So I transferred from this small, amazing private music education school in Chicago to the public university system in Oshkosh. Auditioned, got in the good choir right out of the gate, but all of my general classes and even my baseline classes like music theory, I had to basically start over. I lost all my credits. They wouldn't honor any of my credits from the previous school. I'm like, okay, well, I'll deal. And the problem is like I was bored out of my mind at that point because I was light years ahead in music theory. And here I am having to go to these classes and redo all this stuff. And my first year music theory was like their third year music theory. So, so I got in with the local choir, which was amazing. Dancers ranging in ages from, I think, like 16 to 80. And it was very community based. And they had me doing choreography. So they would have some of their singers do dancing during their big numbers. So I started choreographing for that.
Nice.
In the meantime, I totally shifted gears and went the IT route. And basically,
really?
Yeah.
Quite the about face there.
And I didn't really know anything about technology other than the exposure that I had to music composition and using MIDI keyboards and some Mac, or at the time, like Apple Macintosh programs, but I didn't know a lick about computers. But I went to the local tech school. I'm so over this. And I just went to their postings board and I just went down the line, 30,000 a year, 20,000 a year, 30,000 a year, 40,000 a year. And it got to 70,000 a year starting, and like 2-year program, computer science. Okay.
Why not? Yeah.
Why not? Yeah. And I ended up having a knack for it. So which is good, because otherwise that could have been bad. But the long-winded answer to your question, I got into West Coast Swing because I was choreographing for this local choir. And one of my dancers in the group said, hey, my roommate's parents, like my friend of a friend, my roommate's parents are hosting this dance this weekend. How about you come by and check it out? You might like it. I'm like, oh, okay. I didn't ask what style, thankfully, because I feel like if I would have asked what style, I probably wouldn't have went. That's just being honest. Like, I just hearing West Coast Swing, I would have thought, Western, forget about it.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay, so it's Saturday night. And I'm like, well, I know a bunch of my dancers are there. I really should just go hang out with them a bit, check this out. So it was late, leave me here. But I want to say it's probably around 9 o'clock.
Okay. And
I go in, and it's this really kind of cool venue, like old Eagles Hall, with this big ballroom, and then this balcony that circled the entire floor.
Oh, nice.
So I worked my way up to the balcony, and I just remember like saying hi to my friends that were there, and then looking down, and it was right at the time the advanced division. At this time, there's no all-star. So advanced is like your best of the best at this event that aren't pros, right? So I'm seeing like Jason Barnes and Carlos Garcia and Jim Becker, Stacy Kramer, Shelly Schrader, all those folks at the time who are like the best in the Midwest, just tearing it up. And I think it's probably some like Prince song or something like that, just going to town. And I remember how exciting and energetic and theatrical it felt to me. So I'm like blown away. And then they finish, and I'm kind of just sitting there kind of like, okay, now I'm interested. How do I do this? And I started talking to the dancer friend that I had that said, her roommate's parents. I said, where are they? Do they teach? And she pointed them out. And then right before I could get to them, I'll always remember this. Barry Jones and Kate Berardino. She was a very, very prominent champion in the showcase division. She's actually originally from St. Louis. Like, I'm almost positive she's from St. Louis, if not lived there for a while. So right before I go down to talk to these folks to get involved, Barry Jones and Kate Berardino take the floor to do a demo of their showcase routine. I got to be careful about how I tell the story because I don't want it to sound bad, but they're in the middle of their routine and something goes south. The music fails, something fails them, and they stop. I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. And what impressed the hell out of me was they said, no, let's go. They said, DJ, just back it up. And they backed it up maybe 10 seconds, 20 seconds. Music starts, and they just pick up the routine right where they're at and completely blow us all out of the water.
Nice.
Just
That's awesome.
tore it up. I'm like, okay, now I want to do that.
Yeah.
So I went down to the instructors and I'm like, so we have this connection. I came to check it out. This is amazing. I understand you teach. I just want to let you know I want to do that and I'm going to win.
That's awesome.
I'm like, I just kind of felt so confident, so passionate about it. So something really drew me in, and I'm like, okay, I want to work my butt off on this. I really want to do this. I want to take it seriously. And I had never studied dance technically. Even when I learned tap for singing in the rain, I learned the sounds and the motions. I didn't learn technique and terms, right?
Right.
But I pull it off. And that was kind of my whole career up to that point. It's like I could do musical staging really well. I could hear a waltz and know what it was supposed to look like, and I could stage it and I could choreograph it on a basic level, which is really all I needed for the groups I was working with. But I couldn't tell you it was a waltz. I couldn't tell you what step they were doing. I just knew what it was supposed to look like, and I knew what the timing was supposed to be. And I could do that. On a very basic level, all the way across the board. So West Coast Swing was the first dance that I ever sought out and said, I want to learn this and I want to learn it right. Matter of fact, a funny story, if you're at all interested.
Bring it on. Yeah.
is I actually danced on the Oprah Winfrey Show.
No kidding.
Yeah. It's one of my credits.
Okay, yeah, you're definitely telling us about that.
All right. So in college, of course, poor, right? Because I'm paying through the nose for this school. And
yeah.
I'm living out of my car. I'm homeless, going to school at the same time. You can't really afford to do anything. So the thing to do back in the day was to call up the local talk shows in the area and try and get their free tickets and then go to these shows. So a few of my friends got tickets for an Oprah taping. And 2 weeks before taping, we all get a phone call, all individually, of course, but we all get the same call. And they're like, sorry, we have to cancel your viewing or your taping for this episode because we've changed it to a specialized episode. And I'm like, okay. And she followed up with, do you like to dance? And I'm like, yeah. Would you mind dancing on TV? And I'm like, sure.
Mr. Spielberg, I have this this short film. Would you like to direct it?
Yeah, right. So I call one of my other friends quickly because I know she's probably on the list and she's probably going to get the call. I was like, do this. No matter what, just do this with me because I need to have a partner. I have to have somebody with me.
Yeah.
So she didn't know any dancing. I knew, like I said, I could fake it. I could fake it till I made it. But she decided and agreed to do it with me. So I showed her some basic steps. And we had 3 rooms to choose from. And this was a holiday special. This is Oprah Winfrey's Christmas special.
Oh, wow.
And she's like, okay, you can either choose hip hop, ballroom, or country. I'm like, I don't want country. So now, and mind you, I completely enjoy it today. But back then, no. So I'm like, hip hop sounds amazing. And she's like, oh, I'm sorry to tell you, hip hop's already full. So she's like, ballroom. I'm like, okay. She goes, you're going to be learning ballroom from Patrick Swayze's wife. I'm like, sweet.
Okay.
Cool.
Awesome.
So we get to the taping. I've got this Kurt Russell hairdo at the time. I've got this really major military flat top Kurt Russell look.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, so this is the format. We're going to start the show in the ballroom. I'm like, okay, cool. And they're like, and we're going to take a set of you dancers that don't know what you're doing, and we're going to teach you some steps. You'll dance a bit, and then we'll go off to the other rooms, and then we'll come back to the ballroom segment or ballroom area, and then the folks that are here that know what they're doing, we'll tape you guys dancing on, to close the show.
Right.
Okay, cool. So in my head, I'm going, all right, okay, got this. So we go out for the group to learn things, and so I'm on the show for probably 5 minutes in the beginning, clearly right in the beginning, right in the front.
Mm-hmm.
And then as we're walking back to our seats, I said, no matter what occurs, do not let go of my hand. And she looks at me and she's like, what are you going to do? So as we're
you're singing Michael Jackson to her right then and there. Just, right. Whatever happens, don't let go of my hand.
Whatever happens, don't let go. So as we're walking back and we hit the mob of people that know what they're doing coming out to the floor, I turn her around and join the mob and we go back out to the floor. And mind you, we don't know what we're doing.
Right.
So Oprah and Stedman come out to close the show, and she's doing her parting words. And in the background, everyone's dancing tango. And I look at my friend, and I'm like, you're going to hate me, but we're going to do it. And she's like, no. She starts shaking her head, and I grabbed her into a tango hold, and we walked clear across the room. So on the airing, Oprah is giving her closing remarks, and my flat top head, my partner goes right in front of the camera to the other side. My 5 seconds of fame.
It's awesome.
Yeah.
This Jack Burton look, and everything.
Yeah.
You're feeling kind of invincible, though.
My ugly mug right across. And oddly enough, they didn't edit it out. It made it to the airing.
Oh, that is so cool.
Yeah, so that was kind of fun.
Since we were talking before about, about competing,
yeah.
Tell us about the first time that you got on the dance floor to compete.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so little nerve-wracking, but I will say I'm a strategist. I like to compete, and I like to try and figure things out. I think that's probably why I do so well in the IT industry as well, because I like to plan, I like to organize, I like to strategize.
Yeah.
And so I knew at my first competition I didn't know a lot, but I paid attention to what was going on with the other contests, and I kind of got a sense and a feeling for the rhythm and cadence of the judges. And what I noticed is that the judges were roaming a lot, so they weren't seeing complete dances. And so I took on the strategy of doing less and trying to be as consistent as I possibly could. So not the most exciting dancing. Most people would probably call it boring.
Right.
But it's novice. And one of the great things about this dance, from a social level or a competitive level, is that if you partner well, a basic leader can get a follower that lives within that basic and totally embellishes on it, and can make a dance where a leader feels maybe slightly boring look really good. And vice versa, right? So you could have a leader that's really strong and take a follower that doesn't know very much, and as long as she lives within the dance, or he lives within the dance when they're following, you can have a really nice, very pleasing performance. So
I'm definitely with you there, because I know that as a West Coast leader myself, I don't know that many moves, but at the many different moves, but at the same time, the ones that I do know, I like to think I do well. And when I have a really great follow to match me and everything, like the chemistry is just there, because I'm seeing everything that she does. Whenever I dance with Robin Johnston, Rachel Garrett, when I danced my first time at Meet Me in St. Louis, I'm there for maybe just 10 minutes or something like that, and Stacey K comes up to me and asks me to dance. And when that happens, you say yes. So, and we had so much fun, and she gave me such a great boost of confidence. It was a great time. She made me feel so welcome there by doing just like what you said. She was able to embellish everything that I knew and then kind of take it to this higher level.
Yep. So, but yeah, that's exactly right. So I kind of I figured that out, luckily, really, really quick. So my first contest, I basically hit the finals. I got a good draw, a follower that was really comfortable in her skin and in her dance. And I literally led sugar push, left side, right side, whip, sugar push, left side, right side, whip. And I just stayed in that cycle the whole final. And we ended up winning. So I ended up winning my very first Jack and Jill.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
This
is before points. So we didn't have the pointed events. So it was you had a wide range of ability in that division. So some folks that maybe could have been in intermediate were still in novice. So I learned a lot from that experience, but I also got the bug, and I'm kind of embarrassed of it today, just because I know so much more. But
but you started. You can know a limited amount of moves and everything, but if you do those really well, it's like Hulk Hogan. He's got basically 3 moves in his arsenal, and he'll be the first to tell you that.
Right.
It's how I do them.
Yeah, so I'm really
And
proud of that dance. The embarrassment comes in where back in the day, they used to have, after the awards, they would have these rooms where all of the staff members would sit at a table.
mm,
And you would get in line and you basically would wait your turn to get some type of feedback or critique from the judges from the weekend. It was a really big
oh,
thing.
that's cool.
But I'm new and I'm super green and I'm super excited. And I feel like the judges did me a favor, right? Like, they were so kind to me to place me first. I remember, and my gosh, I don't even know if they remember, and I'm afraid to bring it up. But Kyle Rad and Sarah Van Drake were on staff that year. That was
Hmm.
my first exposure to them. I can just remember running up to them after awards in this little line-up session going, "Oh, thank you so much." You know, like the whole "they love me, they really love me" speech.
Right.
I was just like on cloud nine, dude. I was just so excited and just caught the bug and really felt like I accomplished something, which, you know, I did. And novice
Yeah.
is no easy feat, but just like knowing the game now as well as I do and as intimately as I do now, it's just really funny, like how green I was back then in my behavior and my reactions. You know, I have a lot of embarrassing moments through my competitive career. I can remember being on major highs because I was doing so well and I was so successful. And then I hit my first event where I didn't make a final. And at the time, my intent was I just really want to understand and learn something. So I remember going up to the great Mario Robal at the time
Hmm.
and said, "Hey, Mario, do you know why you didn't put me in the finals?" And you know, at the time, being super green, I don't understand my voice inflection or how I'm presenting myself. I just didn't like. I'm in this heightened state of competition, and I just really want to do well. That, you know, it could probably come off really bad, like I expected it, or just I don't know how to really phrase that. But I remember saying to him like, "Hey Mario, do you know why you didn't put me in the finals?" And he was like, "Well, you had 3 errors, 2
Oh no.
misses, and 1 timing issue." Like he was very statistical
Just
about
matter of fact,
very
like
matter of
just
fact. And I remember walking away going, "Well, that was cool." But I know that just because I know how the competitive environment as well as I do now, that how that could have come across, and I probably got some type of rep at that point of being someone who thought he was entitled or better than he was. So it's just made me really sensitive to how I approach things now and how I interact even with folks that ask me those questions, and the sense of responsibility there is around that being a professional.
yeah. The last thing you want is to come off as someone who's like, "Don't you know who I am?"
Right.
Because
Yeah.
they can immediately turn around and say no, and then all of a sudden there you are 2 feet tall again.
Yeah. So I learned a great deal from that, and I super respect Mario for, especially because he was such a solid judge and good judge that he could just off a cuff say exactly what he saw, and he didn't owe me anything, right? He didn't owe me a single word, but that's a testament to who he is. So yeah, so I mean, a lot of embarrassing moments. And whenever I teach my competitive seminars, it's almost like I'm doing a stand-up show because of all the things I've experienced through my career that are just laughable.
And that's something that I need to say, like that played a part in your workshop, your Saturday workshop that you had with us, in me taking myself to like another level, because the one thing that you really helped me with was relaxing. And a big part of that was the way that you taught. You had us laughing, you had us into it, you had us connected, and you had us invested in what was going on. And it didn't feel it. No dance should ever feel like work. Like as soon as it feels like work, then it's not. Then why are you doing it? It just gave it like this extra level of fun that just made me want to keep going with it. There are a couple of moves and everything that I still remember that I've tried to incorporate them and everything, and Cheryl will be like, "No, you're not doing it right."
Yeah, we all do that though. We
Yeah.
all explore that.
So tell us about like that. Like when you graduated to becoming, like as you're, becoming an instructor, like were
Yeah.
people starting to look in your direction and saying like, "Teach me"?
Yeah, I have to really attribute and show major props and thanks to the local instructors at the time. So it's the same individuals that I talked to in Oshkosh that really they were excited about me And that really felt special. They were excited about everybody. I don't want that statement to sound like they isolated me in any way, shape, or form. But they were always excited about new dancers. And so when we would go out to a local dance, I can remember very fondly them like going up to their friends and the the folks that had been around for a while, like, you have to dance with him. And that just stuck with me. And as Brian and Donna they had started the Northeast Wisconsin Rebels. So that's my tie to St. Louis Rebels, is that I actually grew up in this dance in a Rebels club. And so that was my connection to St. Louis. But they were very supportive of me right out of the gate. And I think them knowing that I was a choreographer and knowing I went to school to be a teacher,
right,
that I've had training and that I've had some success, and I was traveling around and studying from the greats. They started slowly but surely giving me the opportunity to do classes. And I think we all discovered pretty quickly that because of my background in working with a wide variety of abilities and talents and a wide variety of people and ages, that I had a knack for explaining things and re-explaining things if need be, to be able to relate with the folks in the room. Mm-hmm. That and I'm not a trained dancer. I went through every trial and tribulation learning this dance that everyone in that room is experiencing. And I try to never forget that. I try to always keep that perspective that I went through these same issues and this is how I overcame it, knowing that my solution isn't the solution for everybody, right, but it's relatable. Like, this is how I solved that problem, and this is how you should explore solving that problem. So they gave me exposure at the local club dances, and that turned into weekly gigs, and then caught my first big break at an event where I got hired to teach a workshop. I worked for free, of course, being brand new, and luckily got exposure to folks that were heavy hitters in the community, and I never looked back. I sought out judges training as quickly as I could, got certified to judge, sought out teachers training as quickly as I could, got certified to teach. So really worked hard just making sure I did it right, and just really kind of got invested into the community, and it took over my life. I went from being very active in music theater and music and community choir to dancing, like almost nonstop, driving 3 hours to Chicago just for an evening dance and driving back 3 hours that same night. Like,
wow.
Just looking back at it, very crazy, borderline irresponsible things to do for this passion, right? Something that just kind of was inside of me for so long, just kind of like, all right, this is my moment. Yeah. And I got to go for it. And I'm going to start setting my sights on like teaching and performing full time. I can remember saying to my girlfriend at the time, like, I'm going to win the Open. She's like, what? You're not going to win the Open. I'm like, no, I'm going to win the Open. I'm going to at least place top 5 because that's how you get recognized.
Right.
And she's like, no, yes, you can get recognized that way, but that's not what's going to make you successful. And I'm like, you know what? You're right. Right. So whereas it's still a goal to get that title, it was really what made me successful was investing my time into community. And for a good 2 years, I think I worked for free wow. at most events, maybe a pass, right? So a pass and shared room. But finally, 2 event directors come to mind that really gave me a shot, which was Bob Basinski, who ran the Michigan Dance Classic at the time, which is why Michigan Classic is so close to my heart. And yeah. Phil Dorrell, who brought me out for Nashville Classic and his events at the time. And when they paid for my time and really invested in making me a feature at their event, that's when I decided to pursue full time.
Wow. Seeing that sort of drive and everything, that's what the show is all about. Like, it's all about, chasing this burning passion and not letting it die out.
And it's a tough journey. Telling the stories, it's really easy to make it sound like it's something that's easy to do if you just put your mind to it. It's definitely not easy. There's a lot of sacrifices I've had to make to be successful at this, but it's a strong enough passion of mine that, for a number of years in my life, almost 20 years now, like I think I'm going on my 19th year of West Coast Swing. At the end of this year, it'll be 19 years. Um, it it really felt like it was an extension of me. Like it was like one of the like it almost connected as closely to me as like trumpet did when I first started playing the trumpet. Like music's really a passion of mine, and I'm comfortable in it. But I think I think because I can make music through dance rhythmically, I still feel like I'm playing an instrument. I still feel like I'm part of the orchestration of the music. Um, so I still have that desire in me. But I mean, so for a long time, it really felt like an extension of me. But a lot of sacrifice there, friendships, relationships. Oh my gosh, like the strain it would put on relationships, and it's quite honestly put me in a position in life where like the one thing that I want the most is like furthest from my reach, which is like starting a family. There are folks that are doing it extremely well. They've got it going on. They've got their kids. They're together. They're invested in this as a business and as a passion, and they're raising their family. But it's not an easy thing to do. I have mad respect for those folks.
Yeah.
Just because there are so many social nuances to this
Mm-hmm.
that, my own can cause, problems with trying to establish and maintain good, positive relationships. So a lot of sacrifice through the years. Do I regret it? Absolutely not. I do love where this dance took my life. I mean, I went from a Wisconsin kid who really, I never left the state border until college.
Yeah.
Like I never left Wisconsin until I went to school in Chicago. And then even there, it was basically just cross the border in Chicago and then drive back to Wisconsin. Like I literally never went anywhere, to traveling all over the US, Canada, and now I'm getting gigs in Switzerland, in Tel Aviv, in Oslo, Norway. Like to grow up never traveling to now having these opportunities, I don't regret it one single bit.
And they're like flying you out, even better.
Way better. Right, way better.
So what was so then it comes to running your own events.
Yeah.
What's that like?
Hard.
Yeah.
It's a potpourri of emotions running an event, and it tailors to a lot of passions and desires of certain people. To like, I like to host. I like to host parties. It's not beyond me to do like a Thanksgiving dinner and invite all of my students and cook a big turkey meal for them, or to have a Christmas party and have all my friends over and host. I like doing that, so it tailors to that side of me. But it's stressful, it's draining, it's financially a massive risk.
Yeah.
But I still run into people today that say like, Spotlight was my first event and it's why I'm doing West Coast Swing and I fell in love with it, or Michigan Classic was my first event, or even Midwest Area's Swing Dance Challenge was my first event, or this happened, or I met this person at your event, or that's the overwhelming joy that comes out of doing it. All those other things add up to like a pretty intense stress ball, but like the release, the overwhelming joy is seeing a packed dance floor, seeing a contest that nobody else thought of and the crowd just going nuts over it. It just feeds into the person that I am, that just wants to entertain or host or just bring people together. And that's kind of the role I try to play in life. So the first event came to me because, again, going back to the same folks that got me started, Ryan and Donna Owens, they were running the Midwest Area Swing Dance Challenge, which was the event that I stumbled upon.
Mm-hmm.
And through the years, they were continuing to run that event, and I get more and more involved each year as a volunteer or at some point staff member. But they were running a club, and at one point they asked me to take over the club because they wanted to pursue other things. And with that, I had all the exposure now to start organizing things, organizing the club, working with the event closer, understanding some of the budgeting aspects of the event, understanding some of the logistics and operations. So I was starting to get the bug for it. And then they started doing, I shouldn't say started, they had been doing a kind of informal, formal-ish New Year's party at a place called the Fin and Feather, close by to Oshkosh. And it had this kind of nice, quaint little room, and there'd be maybe like 50 folks that would be of like the local community, and some folks would drive up from Madison, even as far away as Chicago. And it'd be like this nice little kind of dance with a little show and a lot of fellowship, just a lot of people just hanging around and enjoying each other's time.
Mm-hmm.
And after they handed the club over to me, they handed that New Year's event over to me to run. So I ran it for 1, maybe 2 years in that fashion.
Mm-hmm.
And I started having aspirations to do something bigger. I'd been to a number of events now, and I'd been to quite a few events that didn't run very well.
Mm-hmm.
And I had been to quite a few events that did run pretty successfully, if not great. And I had held many roles. I've worked the registration desks. I've worked as a judge. I've worked as a head judge. I've worked as an MC. So I was really getting to understand all of the operational. It's kind of like music theater for me, in a sense, that I was starting to understand how all the roles worked together and how this machine got put together and ultimately got executed. So I asked everyone if they'd be cool with me making the New Year's thing a workshop weekend with a couple comps, and they're like, "Yeah, we're on board." So I essentially took over ownership of that little dinner party of like 50 people, maybe 60,
Right.
and moved it to Milwaukee and created my business entity at the time was Spotlight Dance and Performing Arts, because I had this aspiration to start my own studio and work with kids and music theater departments. And so I created the LLC of Spotlight Dance and Performing Arts.
Mm-hmm.
So I named my New Year's event Spotlight Dance Celebration. I didn't want it to be challenged. I didn't want it to be run with the word classic. I wanted to really celebrate everyone and celebrate dance. And oh gosh, I remember the first year we were in this hotel in Milwaukee, and we're in one of the back rooms that had like linoleum floor and pillars and big loading doors, because this is where they did load in for all of their other conventions. And we have this dance floor down on this linoleum floor. But like that was the first time I kind of did something a little risky, and I was doing improv comedy at the time. As an outlet up in Oshkosh. I'm like, well, what if I get the theater sports guys from Milwaukee to come and do a show?
That's really cool.
Yeah, so I did the dinner show for New Year's. We had the improv comedy. They involved the guests, and that was kind of like my first out of the box moment from the world of what was becoming kind of cookie cutter events. The events that I really recognized as doing well all had their own personality. Like Grand Nationals, they had their open Jack and Jill. That was really a really cool thing to be a part of. And Phoenix had their free Jack and Jills in their Champions of Champions division. So they had kind of their own character. And all the really big, like nasty events of the time, Dallas Dance was like one of my absolute favorites. They had character to them. They had like this tent on the side of the floor. And if you were in any spotlight division, you would get some knickknack. I have like 8 Dallas Dance shot glasses.
Nice.
And they had like this tent back there with like a massage table and brownies the size of your head. Like, so like all the really big successful events had a characteristic about them that was unique and you could relate to that event. And so that's kind of what I wanted to bring to Spotlight. So I took that risk of like, well, I'm gonna bring in some comedians, a non-dance act, for the dinner show. And it went extremely well. So I think the first year, I'm probably gonna get the numbers wrong, but I feel like the first year Spotlight, we had like 120 people. And then the next year it grew 20%. And then the next year it grew 20%. And the next year it grew 20%. I think I went probably 8 years before I had a little decline in numbers and lost money, but lost money every year. Like legit, straight up lost money every year. Well, yeah, because I'm my own worst enemy in that respect, because I'm like, okay, well, I could do the event exactly the same way I did it last year, or
you gotta push that envelope and see how far you can go. Oh, I get it. Yeah.
Or I could higher level pros and add more elements to it, hoping to break even, and then wouldn't quite get where my goals were. But I would say there was one year that I straight up was like in my hotel room bawling just like a little kid, because I can't do anything right. But people were loving the event, and so I just kind of kept on. and I was doing everything. I was wearing every hat. So like, I couldn't afford a chief judge, but
Yeah.
I had the experience, and I, I was good at it. Like I understood what it meant to be a good, ethical, fair, strong, efficient, effective head judge. So like I didn't have the money. So I basically created a role which was contest administrator, which basically did all the work that a head judge would typically do. But during the contests themselves, I would assign one of the active judges as being a head judge to make those decisions on the fly, like music cutout or wardrobe malfunction or something like that. So I wouldn't do any of the real time stuff, but I did the head judge stuff. I couldn't afford a scorekeeper, and volunteers at the time in that realm that really understood scoring and relative placement they just didn't exist. And if they did, they were already efficient or effective in a different role. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to score. Had a registration. I'm like, those first couple of years, I did it all. Well, I still stay up all night. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend like anything's changed, but the intensity of the workload has changed. But I'd literally be up all night. People would walk by after, finishing social dancing at 6 a.m. and I'm still sitting in the little closet room at my computer, getting things completed and ready and prepped for the next day. So those first couple of years were just intense, man. But I still enjoyed it. And at the end of the day, it got me even more invested in the community because I met so many more people and I had interactions with so many more people, and getting to emceeing my own event feels like nothing else because you have this confidence around you that everyone in the room knows who you are.
Yeah.
You don't know who they are, but they all know who you are. And they're on this journey here with you, and I feel so comfortable in that space.
And you've gone, and you are confident knowing that you have gone above and beyond for their enjoyment.
Yeah, and I've always said, like, early on in the day, even I can remember like being an attendee, like I was associating the feeling of an event with the character, or what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, character's good. The character of the event director, like the personality, the personality of an event. Like, what does that really mean? Well, it really embodies like how invested is the event director in what's going on? How much do they care about its success? And then how much do they care about the enjoyment or entertainment of their guests? So I've never been an event director that steps away from critical roles or parts or pieces of the event, and many times, and probably rightfully so, many times been labeled as a control freak, probably. But
you know what works.
Yeah, I don't like to think that I am, but I think of it as like I'm invested in the quality of the product, and I've seen too many things go wrong at events that were outside of the event director's control because they weren't invested in that process or that decision making or whatever that moment was.
Yeah.
Now, mind you, I gained relationships like with Vivian Hahn over the years, who became a really amazing, solid partner, and Leah Naparstak is part of my contest coordinator. Back in the day, early on when she was traveling a lot, Crystal Fisher, because they worked with me so much, they would know what I was going to say before I said it. And so I finally got to that type of relationship with key staff that, I trust them wholeheartedly. Not that I really didn't trust people before, but I know where their investment is. And it really got to a point where like, yeah, these folks have my back. Like there's no single event director that runs a successful event on their own. They've got to have investment from their pro staff, from their volunteers, from the key roles that just no matter what have that event director's back. And if you get those people to rally around you, that's when an event really takes off and is really successful. And I was fortunate that I had really amazing friends that were peers that I hired out of the gate that always had my back. And so it really started to take the pressure off through the years. Matter of fact, the first tournament, for those of you that are listening that maybe have no clue what the heck I'm talking about, there's as in sports like March Madness, there's tournament style competition in many sports. In dance competition, you just don't see it very often. The closest thing that I think comes to it is probably like hip hop dance battles, and the way they structure their contests. I wouldn't really know because I've never really been in a hip hop contest, but just seeing the videos that I've seen is probably the closest thing. But so the second year of Spotlight, I pull all my staff members into a room, and if you can imagine this conversation, I'm trying to explain to them what we're going to do. And I'm like, okay, so for the Pro Strictly, which is where you get to pick your own partner, I'm like, we are going to do these kind of heads up battles, tournament style. There'll be like a red couple and a blue couple, and the judges are going to judge you right after you dance, and they're like, what, we have to wear red, you know, like there's such a foreign concept. And like Jason Micklick and those guys in Barnes, they all laugh about it to this day because they all remember like that conversation, that moment at that Spotlight where we're like, yeah, we're gonna do this. And if they weren't who they were to me, like if they weren't my close friends and my peers and folks that had my back, that idea never would have taken off. Because I can remember trying to explain it to other folks. I'm like, don't do that. That sounds dumb. Like, that doesn't sound like, that won't work. That won't work in our community. That won't work in our environment. You shouldn't do that. But they were all like, Doug, if you want to do it, we'll do it.
Nice.
They didn't know what the heck they were doing.
But they trusted you. You know, like,
right. They were willing to, die on the sword for me in that moment. And I'm forever grateful for that because, I mean, here we are, 10 years later, maybe, ish. Yeah. And the tournament format's all over the world now. I'm super grateful to those folks for, like, going out on the limb and doing that and executing the first tournament.
Since we're talking about these firsts, we gotta talk about the big one, the main event. Granted, this is the most that we have spoken, you know, the whole time that we've known each other. Yeah. You know, it's just like our circles just haven't, you know, collided as much.
Right.
But at the same time, like, just, you know, knowing you as much as I do, I would definitely say that Global Online Open, talk about a crown jewel.
Yeah.
Right there. How did that now, you know, like, and since you were talking about IT before, I was just like, that explains so much.
Yeah, it does help to have a little bit of that technical background, but, you know, I don't know if I still recognized how big this can be. I think I know how big I hope for it to be and how big I want it to be. Even in its first season, it went beyond in terms of like what the competitors brought to the table than I could ever have dreamed. But it's interesting to me because this could potentially be my biggest success and quite possibly, maybe, hopefully, I don't know, like legacy in this dance community came out of one of my absolute biggest failures in my career. And without that failure, I'm not sure that this would even be happening, quite honestly.
Yeah.
You know, it kind of relates and kind of comes back to like how you started the show talking about like you were in a tough spot or a deep, you know, dark place, and coming out of WestEcon, I was in a really bad place. Like, I really took a hit on that convention.
So tell you know, just kind of, you know, acquaint our listeners just a little bit with WestEcon.
Yeah.
You don't have to go too deep into it, but, you know, like just.
Yeah. So after years of running 2 successful events and having a hand in a lot of other successful events, I had started culminating an idea to do something on the lines in our community, what would equate to like a Comic-Con. This to me, a true convention, right? We refer to a lot of our dance events as events, rightfully so.
Right.
But in essence of a true convention. If you think about like a convention you would attend as an IT professional or as a real estate professional or as anything that has a major hobby. So I use Comic-Con as a really close example. Bunch of people all over the world passionate about different elements within the comic industry. Some folks really passionate about drawing. Some people really passionate about movies. Some people really passionate about models, television. It's like, but they all come together to this to celebrate, to hone their craft, to learn more about their craft, to get better at their craft, and then to learn about other people's interests and moments. Like, so just an overall very community-based type of activity, a true convention.
Right.
So I started culminating the idea of like, and I was probably, I was definitely overconfident from the success of my previous events. I felt like I had a reputation of running well-organized events. It was always well received. I just felt like my name had finally gotten out there and it was time to take this risk. And I spent, I think 7 years just putting together the details and really forming this plan to put together this convention. And so I picked a massive, really major, amazing convention hotel, Marriott in Orlando. I picked dates that at the time were free and clear. No other event was on that weekend. I reached out to the event directors for all of the events in November. Like, I really felt like I did my due diligence to try and set myself up for success. I made the weekend pass really cheap because I wanted to be accessible, but then the educational pass, the specialty pass all had additional charges. And by the time you pick the specialty pass and your weekend pass, it was pretty much what you would spend for any normal dance event. So I really felt like I put the groundwork in. And long story short, a bunch of variables came into play, constraints that weren't present in the initial planning stages came up, and I just had this massive cascading waterfall event of like people canceling their rooms. And so I think it was all teed up to be a promoter's dream. We announced the event rooms, hotel rooms being available a year out from the event. And I think the first 24 hours, I had 200 room nights booked.
Wow.
We announced tickets to go on sale, and in the first 24 hours had 200 some odd tickets sold. Like, teed up. Like, all right, so this trend, like this is exactly what I had hoped. Everything was there, and good stream of registrations all leading up to the event. So like, I hired 8 top US Open couples. I had the best MCs in the business lined up. Folks from the trade, like from hotel industry, to come in and go over with event directors on how to build proper contracts, like whole 9 yards. And then 3 weeks before the event, it just pummeled, just like the whole bottom fell out. And at the end of the day, ended up losing quite a fortune. Life-changing, really, really life-changing. So it's like the perfect wedding. I always explained it like it's the perfect wedding. The people that were there really loved and appreciated everything about it.
Yeah.
Glowing reviews about it. But in the back office side of things, it's just dismal. Like, I had to reach out to folks that I respected a great deal, peers of mine, folks that I wouldn't even say are peers of mine, idols of mine, or people that I looked up to and emulated, and had to ask them if they would cancel out on their contract because I just couldn't. I didn't know where the money was going to come from.
Wow.
So a very embarrassing, very crushing time to take that huge risk and have it just fail so miserably. So that was the West Econ attempt. And so coming out of that, as you can imagine, just a debt all over the place. And I had, as a matter of fact, 6 months of extreme fear that I didn't know what the hotel was going to do. Like,
right.
I had all these room nights that I was supposed to satisfy, and like hundreds of thousands of dollars like they're expecting from me. And so I was just dreading that call. And of course I got the call, and I'm like, well, like, I don't have it. Like this is just the reality of it. Like there's one of two ways this thing's gonna go. Like either you're gonna forgive and forget, or you're gonna come after me and you're not gonna get anything anyhow, and you're basically just going to destroy my life. Luckily, they never. Like, it was one of the weirdest things because they ended the phone call with, "We'll get back to you," and then they just never bothered to call me back.
Really?
Yeah, so
Wow.
major bullet dodge there, but that still massive debt.
Yeah.
I just got away from the hotel room commitment. But in any case, bad place. I just really went to a bad place. I felt like they weren't fair. They weren't fair statements in any way, shape, or form. But I just felt like the community let me down. Like I've already, like, through the years put so much of my money towards, quality events and losing money year after year, but still doing them. And here I try to do this thing for them. And so I just really, really bad place. Ultimately, it ended up in me walking away from my two successful events, Spotlight and Michigan Classic. Really, in those decisions, I just want to be clear that those decisions weren't because now I had a grudge against the community. I resolved those feelings really quickly. That was the initial impact.
Yeah.
The decision to walk away from those events was pure responsibility. I really sat back and thought about it. And I'm like, well, if I'm in debt, I shouldn't be going to a casino. I should be taking care of my debts with the money that I have and not taking risks. And to me, running an event was the same as basically going to a casino. Like, even though the event was successful, any given year, something could happen which would cause attendance to go down, and now I lose money again, and I'm already in a situation where I owe a bunch of people money. So it just came down to, like, well, this is the responsible thing to do. So luckily, I have good friends that took both of those events that have been by my side the whole time. So they understand where my heart was in those projects, but then they also bring their own heart to the project. So it's kind of cool now because it's kind of a mashup of, like, both of us, like all three of us. So it's cool, and I'm really excited to see where those events are going. But that leads me to Global Online Open. Like, here I was sitting now not being an event director, no money, because I'm just putting every dollar I have back into getting stable again and surviving, doing that successfully. But I just had this urge to, like, what can I do? What can I do for the community? What can I do that's new, that's different, that's interesting, but extremely low risk? So I'm like, I'm just driving in the car. I'm spending a lot of hours in the car. And I'm like, well, it all stemmed from the Monday morning quarterback.
Yeah.
Meaning like, there are so many people that, like, will critique or criticize or even have a favorable opinion on a routine once they see the video of it on social media.
Yeah.
Right? And they oftentimes, most times, disagree with the overall judging, right? Like, they have their own opinion of what the placement should have been.
Yeah, they're just wondering, like, how could that one, how could that one wind up coming in first when that one, like, had everyone up on their feet, and like, it was, it's pretty amazing, like, seeing that, like, my Cheryl has shown me many different West Coast Swing videos and everything, and shown me, like, one particular routine that just absolutely floored me, and just, like, they came in third. It's like, what?
Yeah, and that's common. That's everybody. I mean, that's in everything that we do too, right? So, like, sporting events. I mean, just everyone has their own opinion about what is good and what they want to support and what they feel should win or place. So I'm like, okay, well, that's interesting. Like, what kind of platform or format can provide that? And then, well, part of the issue is that it's such a subjective sport, and many times you're comparing apples to oranges. Like, routines can have completely different flavors. They can have really completely different storylines. They can have so there's a spectrum that can really separate two couples, and that's a very positive thing. That's a very artistic, positive thing. But from a comparable, like, judging something, like, it's really difficult for most people to say, well, couple A has impacted me more than couple B. So I'm like, well, what if they had the same constraints? What if they had the same song, and we put their choreography up side by side and let the masses now have closer to apples and apples, to make a judgment call and ultimately support what they feel is quality or good. And then the third or fourth, depending on how you're counting, aspect of it was the swing content side of things. And there's always these talks either by judges or by spectators or by competitors themselves after the events about, was that routine really swing? And then add the level of frustration where you go to one event and you'll have a judge give you a swing content error or warning, or violation, and then you go with the exact same routine to another event and you don't get any. So I'm like, okay, so how can I build a platform that can kind of make people voice what they feel is quality and what fits our dance and what represents our dance? And ultimately, just through a bunch of planning and thinking about it and working with really good people, like Debbie Figueroa was just a massive asset to this whole project. We culminated and put something together that I'm quite frankly really proud of, and I'm like so hard not being a fan the whole time, because like I'd get the videos and like I would immediately have my reactions and my opinions. I'm like, no, I have to step back. I'm running this thing. I just have to be non-partial. But I was inspired, man. I was just totally inspired by what everyone brought to the table right out of the gate. Like Jesse Lopez, just like, all right, so we got video. So how about I dance in the dark with a black light and really go after like what this song means? And like, I was like, all right, cool. And then like, now if other competitors see this,
how are they going to push the envelope?
Exactly. And it just kind of, and it just took off from there. It's just amazing.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Yeah, so the whole premise of it was like low risk. And then I made some big mistakes too, like right out of the gate. So like I put together the business model. I'm like, okay, how can this thing be self-sustaining? All right, well, let's go. I'll do I kind of like had the mindset of treating it like, such a mistake. Treating it like these local Dancing with the Stars charity events, like where people pay, and then the couple that gets the most money wins. And oh my gosh, what a stupid decision that was out of the gate. But but it was like, given where I was in the time, it's like I've got to be able to do this and not lose money. Yeah. And so I want to, and I should say I have to, and I want to give these competitors good prize money, because this is a lot of work. Like this is a lot of investment from them. I didn't want them just winning. They want the winners just winning like $400, $500, or $1,000. I just like, they're putting together in this period of time all this, like 4 routines, all this work. I'm like, it's got to be good prize money. So like, okay, what's a business model that can support this? Oh, let's do pay per vote. That sounds great. Awesome. Right? So set up everything. I got everything wired up. The videos local to the website, like technology wise, I was set up the PayPal buttons, tested it a few times. Really, like everything was ready to rock and roll, and we launched. And all right, there's people voting. This is cool. This is great.
And it also kind of keeps people honest too, because people could very well just go ahead and keep on bang, 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 know, running up the table and everything, like on all these different, on this one person's votes, or even their own, or even like voting for their own stuff.
Yeah, so power clickers, right? Just vote, 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 vote. So if money, if there's a financial stake, chances are they're not going to go nuts.
Yeah.
So that first morning was like, I'm sweating, sitting at my desk, and I'm like, I've never hit refresh on Facebook so many times in such a short period of time, just to get a sense of what the overall response is from people. And there's some really positive, like out of the gate, some really, really good stuff. And then all of a sudden, post pops up from an international person, someone overseas, and they're like, this is completely and totally unfair. And all of a sudden just read it off like gut-wrenching, truthful, like, why didn't I consider that? I'm an idiot. Just matter-of-fact facts like currency exchange. It's more expensive for them. They have different fees for using PayPal. So whereas it was really cheap US side to vote, European side, given what country you're in, significantly more expensive to vote. Now I've run into a data integrity issue because a vote US side
Mm-hmm.
didn't have the same value as a vote or number of votes European side. And I just like, I just wanted to cry. Like I literally like, just I can't believe this. I'm like, of course, I'm like, I reacted and I'm like, thank you so much. I didn't know what to do. I stepped back, and then a good buddy of mine, kind of in the shadows a lot, but he's always got my back. He kind of sends me a text and he's like, "Oh, are you sure you really want to be doing it this way? There's probably better ways to approach this." And what I always appreciate from people is that if you bring something to the table, even if it's a bad idea,
Mm-hmm.
it's so much more productive and so much better received than, you know what, I don't like that. That's a bad idea, right? But him, fortunately, the quality of friend that he is, he was like, you know what, I don't know if you really want to be doing that. You know, there are these types of ways you could approach it. And I didn't agree with some of them because I felt like it was going the complete opposite direction of what I wanted to do. But he had some very valid points right out of the gate. So I had to pivot. I had to pivot really fast, and I had to pivot day one. So I like right in the middle of the voting day, I'm like, I'm sorry, folks, I'm bringing voting down. And I gave myself, I don't remember, I think I gave myself 24 hours to recode the entire website. And mind you, I've never coded in this platform before.
Wow.
So a whole realm of syntax and operations and methods and procedures that I didn't know how to invoke. And I'm at a local dance event, still trying to like code and rewire. And so a couple days later, a couple of days later, I had to relaunch with a whole new, like I think I found like a temporary website, like an ad, like one of those ad generated sites where, you know, there's just a crap ton of ads on it, but it had a free polling system on it,
Mm-hmm.
where they had to authenticate as a Facebook user, and then they could vote once and once only, and it controlled that. I'm like, this is perfect. So I integrated that a day later.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm like, okay, people, I know it's a little bit of inconvenience, but go here to vote. And people did, and it was free. And I had to get the word out, like, okay, I've changed the model. It's now free. And that was very positively received. Thank the Lord. And then I had until the next Monday to get a completely new system in place. And that was me doing database development on this web platform that I had no idea how to code in.
Wow.
And so it was a little buggy at first. Luckily, I had some friends that could help me. I guess, I don't know if you can call it a beta test since we already launched, but essentially, user test the system.
Mm-hmm.
It's not perfect, but it handled the things that needed to be handled perfectly, which was people had to authenticate with their Facebook account, and it would control only one vote per user, which was like the key thing.
Yeah.
And so I ran into
you got to keep that going. You know.
Yeah, absolutely. That was the most important thing I felt like coming out of everything, is I had to make sure I had a legit, fair voting system.
Yeah.
And so we got that on our way, and now here I am 2 weeks into this project going, crap, the budget for this thing is $7,000.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what am I gonna do? I'm like, not again.
Right.
And I swallowed some pride, and I started crowdsourcing. I really worked hard to try and get advertising, found that to be more of a challenge than I thought. Like, I have this horrible flaw of I tend to think other people think the same way that I do.
Right.
So like me as an event director, if I'm like, oh, you have this online contest, and these videos are going to get thousands of views, of course I'll spend $200-$300 on an ad.
Of course, yeah.
Of course I'm going to do that. That's going to go way farther than any flyer I ever put on a table.
Mm-hmm.
But not everybody thinks that way.
Yeah.
or rightfully so, in our market where most events lose money, it's hard to invest in something that's unknown or the intangible, right? So it was a major struggle to get advertising that would cover the costs that I needed. So I started a crowdfund, and it came down to the wire, but thankfully I broke even on it. So I can call it a success. It was a really good first season.
That's awesome. And I'm so looking forward to seeing where this goes. Doug, you've been just an amazing guest and a terrific storyteller. Before we wrap up, do you have anything else you would like to plug?
No, not really. I think just in general, I know the exciting thing about this podcast and this format is I was blown away by the variety of guests you're going to have, which means this is going to reach out to folks that have never taken a dance lesson before, or have, or like me, just didn't understand or know what West Coast Swing is. I would say if you have an opportunity, go to YouTube and just start YouTubing West Coast Swing. You'll never appreciate and love the dance more than when you just first see it. So you'll enjoy it, it'll entertain you, and then find some local classes and just stick with it. It's not the easiest dance out of the gate, but in the end, it's the most rewarding, because ultimately what West Coast Swing brings to the table, more so than any other dance, is that you can be who you are. And it's an extremely welcoming, diverse, and comfortable community and environment. So I hope you check it out.
That's exactly why I wanted to have, someone affiliated with West Coast Swing involved in the first batch of interviews. And I know that there will be other West Coast Swing dancers, instructors, everything that I will be reaching out to, because I would love to hear their stories as well. Like, I would love to hear how they got in and everything, just as much as, we're going to hear, just like Doug said, you're going to hear from a whole lot of people from a whole lot of different walks of life. And I am so thrilled, Doug, that you were able to take the time to be here and with us and share your Excelsior journey.
Thank you so much for asking me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. And for everyone, let me just say, don't let the setbacks and everything, don't let them crush you. You got to keep going. You never know. You're going to wind up with an idea that is truly, truly remarkable. And that's what Doug has. That's what a lot of other people have. And I'm really looking forward to seeing this show develop and to see what it can be, to see where its inspiration will lead all of us. So again, thank you so much for being here, Doug. I really appreciate it. And a big thank you to all of you who are listening here. So for Excelsior Journeys, this is George Sirois. Ever upward.